The first time Claire Whitfield saw the gray truck parked outside Lincoln Elementary, she assumed it belonged to someone else's father. It was raining, the kind of steady, Portland rain that never announced itself as a storm but soaked you just the same. And her son Eli was standing under the school awning with his backpack pulled over his head like a tent. She'd been stuck at the hospital, a nurse short on the pediatric floor, and by the time she'd broken free and driven across town, the truck was already gone. And Eli was climbing into the passenger seat of her car grinning like he'd gotten away with something. "Some guy gave me a ride to the covered bench," he said. "Said his name was Nathan. He waited with me till I saw your car." Claire didn't think much of it. Portland was full of decent people. And Eli, at 8 years old, had a way of making friends with anyone who stood still long enough. But the next Tuesday she was late again, and the gray truck was there again, parked at the exact same angle, engine idling low. And the Thursday after that, by the third week, Claire started timing her shifts around it without meaning to, telling herself she wasn't checking, telling herself it was fine, until one Tuesday she left work 40 minutes early just to see who Nathan was. She parked half a block down and watched a man in his mid-30s, broad-shouldered, dressed like he'd come straight from a construction site, walked to the covered bench and crouched down to Eli's height. They talked. Eli laughed at something. The man reached into his jacket, pulled out a granola bar, and handed it over like it was nothing, like it was routine. Like this had happened so many times it no longer needed a conversation attached to it. Then he waited, hands in his pockets, until Claire's car eased up to the curb. He nodded once at her through the windshield, helped Eli check his seatbelt, and walked back to his truck without a word. He never came inside. He never asked for coffee, never lingered, never gave her more than that single nod, and somehow that restraint made her more curious than if he'd tried to introduce himself properly. She asked the school office about him. The secretary, a woman named Dorothy, who'd worked there longer than Claire had been alive, said Nathan Reyes did maintenance work for 3 of the properties on that block, including the old furniture warehouse 2 doors down. "He's quiet," Dorothy said, like that explained everything. "Started noticing your boy standing out there alone on the days the rain got bad. Just started waiting with him. Didn't ask anybody's permission. Didn't need to, I suppose." Claire went home that night and sat at her kitchen table longer than she needed to, turning the information over like a stone she couldn't decide whether to keep. She had been divorced for 2 years. Eli's father had moved to Sacramento with a marketing job and a new fiancée, and his calls had thinned from weekly to occasional to, more recently, apologetic voicemails that arrived after the fact. She'd built a life around efficiency. Get Eli to school, get to the hospital, get him picked up, get dinner made, get through the guilt of being tired all the time. She hadn't built any room for a stranger who apparently didn't think twice about standing in the rain for a kid who wasn't his. The following Tuesday, she left work on time. She parked across from the bench, engine off, and walked over instead of waiting in the car. "You're Nathan," she said. He looked up, and for a second, something crossed his face that looked almost like being caught. "Yes, ma'am. You don't have to keep doing this." "I know I don't." "Then why?" He was quiet for a moment, glancing at Eli, who was busy showing off a rock he'd found near the flower beds. "My little brother used to stand outside of school by himself a lot," Nathan said finally. "Nobody ever came for him on time. I was working 2 states away and couldn't do anything about it. He's grown now, doing fine, but I think about those afternoons more than I'd like to admit." He shrugged, like the explanation embarrassed him. "Your boy reminded me of him. Figured I could do something useful with the 20 extra minutes. I've got most days." It wasn't a grand confession. It wasn't romantic or rehearsed. It was the kind of honesty that came from a man who hadn't expected to be asked, and it disarmed Claire more than any smooth answer could have. After that, she stopped avoiding him. She started arriving a little earlier some days, not to catch him but to talk, standing at the edge of the covered bench while Eli chased pigeons across the wet pavement. She learned that Nathan had grown up in Eastern Oregon, that he'd spent 4 years in the Marines before coming home to fix things for a living because he liked seeing a problem solved with his own hands. She learned he lived alone in a rented house 2 streets from the warehouse, that he cooked simple food and read secondhand paperbacks and had never been particularly interested in being noticed by anyone. Eli, for his part, adored him instantly and without complication, the way children do when an adult simply shows up and keeps showing up. He started saving stories for Nathan, little updates about school, about a math test, about a boy named Marcus who'd been mean to him at recess. Nathan listened to all of it with the same unhurried attention, crouched at eye level, never checking his phone, never looking like he had somewhere better to be. Still, he never came inside. Claire invited him for dinner in October, half out of gratitude and half out of something she wasn't ready to name, and he declined gently, said he didn't want to overstep, said the ride home was enough. She invited him again in November, when the rain turned to sleet. and Eli begged for Nathan to come, see his fort in the backyard. And again, Nathan found a polite reason to leave before crossing the threshold. It took Claire a while to understand that his refusal wasn't coldness. It was carefulness. Nathan had watched enough people come into his life and either take too much or leave too fast. And he'd built the same kind of careful distance Claire had, just aimed in a different direction. He gave everything to the 20 minutes at the bench and kept everything else locked away, as if intimacy past that point required a kind of promise he wasn't sure he could keep. Claire found herself wanting to break that lock gently, the way you'd coax a stray animal closer with patience instead of force. By December, the pickups had become the best part of her week, and she hated how much that admission scared her. She talked to her sister on the phone one night, half laughing at herself. "I'm looking forward to seeing a man who won't even step into my house," she said. "What does that say about me?" "It says you found somebody who isn't in a hurry," her sister said. "That's rarer than you think." On the 28th day, a Thursday, Claire arrived to find Eli sitting alone on the bench. No truck, no Nathan. Eli said Nathan hadn't come that day, that another man from the warehouse had walked him under the awning instead. Claire felt something drop in her stomach that had no business dropping, given how careful they had both been to keep things exactly where they were. She called Dorothy at the school office. Dorothy hesitated before answering, which told Claire everything before the words did. Nathan had been in an accident at the warehouse 2 days earlier, a ladder slipping on wet flooring, a fall that had broken his collarbone and 2 ribs. He was at Providence Medical Center. He hadn't told anyone to call Claire because, Dorothy said carefully, he didn't think it was his place to worry you. Claire drove to the hospital that night without fully deciding to. She found Nathan propped up in a hospital bed, arm in a sling, looking more irritated by his own helplessness than by the pain. "You didn't have to come," he said, echoing, without meaning to, the very words she'd said to him weeks before. "I know I didn't," Claire said, sitting down in the chair beside his bed. "But somebody should." He looked at her for a long moment, and something in his face finally gave way, the same careful distance cracking just slightly at the edges. "Eli okay?" "Eli's fine. Worried about you, though. He drew you a card. Insisted on including a dinosaur for reasons neither of us understands." Nathan almost smiled. "Tell him I'll take it." They sat there a while, the hospital quiet around them, and Claire found herself saying the things she'd been circling for a month. "You've spent 30 days making sure my son never stood outside alone. Let me make sure you're not alone right now, that's all. No pressure pass tonight." He didn't answer with words. He reached over, slow because of the sling, and took her hand, and that was answer enough. He came home 2 weeks later, still healing, still stubborn about doing things himself, and on the first Sunday after his discharge, Claire invited him for dinner one more time. This time, when she opened the door, he stepped inside. Eli met him in the hallway, waving the dinosaur card like a flag, and Nathan crouched down, careful of his ribs, and let the boy hug him anyway. Claire watched from the kitchen doorway, dish towel still in her hands, and thought that some people spend their whole lives waiting for someone to walk through a door, never realizing that the waiting itself, the 20 minutes at a bench in the rain, had already been the truest kind of arrival. Nathan stayed for dinner that night and many nights after. He never made a show of it, never treated it like a victory. He simply kept showing up the way he always had, except now the door was open, and he no longer had to stand outside it.